Welcome to the third dimension. On May the 6th, the Omani foreign minister announced on social media that the United States and the Houthis had reached a ceasefire deal under which the Houthis agreed to halt hostile action against shipping in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The announcement came just ahead of Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar. While the truce has brought a halt to direct hostilities with the United States, the Houthis have made it clear that they will not affect their military operations against Israel. The United States military said it has struck more than 1,000 targets during its operation against the Houthis, known as Operation Rough Rider, started on March the 15th. According to observers, a ceasefire with the United States offers the Houthis a much-needed reprieve, allowing them to preserve the fighting capacity and avoid further attrition. To discuss this topic, joins me from the United States, Fernando Carvajal. Mr. Carvajal is a former United Nations expert in Yemen and a senior Yemen and Middle East analyst. Fernando, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Doctor.
Okay. Now, if we could begin with this now, President Trump is in the Gulf, Fernando, and away from the billion-dollar contracts and parades of camels, how can we differentiate between Trump's foreign policy and Trump's trade policy, and where does Yemen lie between both?
Well, Trump policy, period, is Trump's policy. It's not the U.S. policy. He keeps making it up as it goes, right? There is definitely a link, a convergence of interest, where Trump has always seen the presidency as a way to advance his personal interest, right? We've seen his children were actually in a tour of the Middle East, of the Gulf, just a week before he arrived in Riyadh for his GCC visit. So we can see the link between his business interest and the political position that he holds in the U.S. This also comes as the U.S. was negotiating with China for the tariffs in Switzerland. This was in Switzerland, and he had a short update that China had agreed to continue talks and lift the tariffs on the U.S. What we see in the Gulf as his first visit. Let's remember that his first foreign trip was the funeral for the late Pope Francis. But this is his first trip as president to Riyadh. It's a big sign. It's a big deal for him and for U.S. policy, which he basically created during his meetings in Riyadh, especially when we're talking about Syria. And hopefully your viewers got a chance to listen to or read Trump's speech in Riyadh, where he attacked the post-World War II liberal structure, the liberal world order, and he basically hinted with more specifics about his approach to U.S. foreign policy, which is isolationist. Yeah. We saw this when Trump first came to office, and Elon Musk and Dodge office went directly after U.S. aid. One of the first things they did was went after U.S. aid. U.S. aid had been a vital pillar of U.S. foreign policy in the post-World War II era.
Yeah. So he was in Saudi Arabia. He started his visit in Saudi Arabia, then headed to Qatar, okay? Today he headed to the UAE. My question again, Fernando, where does Yemen lie in Trump's agendas of this visit?
We all have to be honest about this. And every time we have a conversation with US diplomats and with Yemeni diplomats, we all agree Yemen is not a policy priority for the United States, for the United States government. It is not a priority. If you recall the creation of the Friends of Yemen, Saudi Arabia was always meant to take the lead when it came to Yemen. This happened with the creation of Friends of Yemen. This happened in 2011 with the creation of the G10, the group of 10 embassies.
Yeah.
This happened with the National Dialogue. This happened since March 2015 when the civil war erupted in Aden.
Yeah.
So the U.S. always delegates Yemen, the approach to Yemen, to Saudi Arabia. What has happened since March 15, what you mentioned in your introduction, follows the follows the Trump administration relisting the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization. If we remember, that's one of the things he promised. That's one of the first things he did when he came into office. And Yemen, under the Trump administration, we have to see it in parallel or as a component of his approach to Iran. Okay, let's go back to the campaign and then his first week in office. He promised to reinstate the maximum pressure policy toward Iran to force them to the negotiating table. So if the way we see it is Israel managed to destroy Hamas and Hezbollah, two vital pillars of the axis of resistance for Iran. The only two left are the Iraqi militia, right? The Shia militia in Iraq, and the Houthis. The Houthis have been the most active, basically, since November 2023, aside from Hamas and Hezbollah, obviously. But Trump's move 2 months ago to mobilize tremendous military equipment to Diego Garcia base was more of a message to Iran. And when we talk about where is the U.S., where does Yemen fit in U.S. policy? Recently, in the last 2 days, I believe, reports from Reuters and other media organizations said that, number one, it was the Houthis who reached out to the U.S. through Oman to request a ceasefire. Number two, the Iranians claim themselves that they pressured the Houthis in order to agree to a ceasefire.
We will discuss this in details a little bit later, Fernando. But you were just talking about the U.S. or Trump's airstrikes, and he mobilized efforts, okay, to attack the Houthis, and it was a message to Iran, okay? My question is, okay, the news of halting what we call bombing the Houthis was a little bit shocking to the international community and to many observers, okay? What about you? How did you react about it? Did you expect it? Was it expected?
No, it was not expected. Again, it was not expected to be done against the Houthis, because we know that Trump's isolationist policy was no war, withdraw from the Middle East, withdraw the troops from the Middle East, just like we're seeing in Syria. But again, it's Trump being unpredictable, but the only way we can explain it is that this is part of his maximum pressure policy toward Iran. Again, yes, the Secretary of Defense made it clear this has nothing to do with the U.S. The airstrikes along the Red Sea have nothing to do with the U.S. This is about the European shipping, about European maritime commerce, about China. And the Secretary of Defense said, I'm tired of bailing the Europeans out. I'm tired of the U.S. bailing the Europeans out. So we see that this approach had nothing to do with the actual attacks on the ships.
Yeah.
right? It had actually, nothing to do with the Houthi threats to the shipping lanes. But the other way we can see it is part of the policy against Iran. Now, when we talk about the impact on the Houthis,
Yeah.
definitely what we see in the visit to the GCC, a main theme is the U.S. providing defense to the GCC countries.
Yes.
Not just Saudi Arabia, but to Qatar, to the Emirates, to Bahrain and Kuwait, right?
Okay.
This is a major theme for this visit.
Okay.
And Trump can capitalize on what he did during Operation Rough Rider, because it absolutely impacted Houthi ability to threaten Saudi Arabia. The U.S. has basically sent the message to the Houthis: we have the capability to sustain a long military operation against you in order to defend your neighbors.
Okay.
And so there are multiple messages in this operation. But we definitely, it was a surprise and in typical Trump approach, unpredictable.
Yeah. So Fernando, so a surprise when he started the campaign, and also a surprise when he ended the campaign.
Trump needs wins. Trump needs to dominate the news cycle every day, right? That is his approach to the presidency. He wants to shock the media every morning or every evening in order to dominate the news cycle.
Yeah.
And so he needed a win after 7 weeks, as I mentioned in another panel. Trump, for 7 weeks for Trump is an eternity, and so politically, and he needed a win. So this deal with the Houthis gave him the opportunity to inject into the narrative that he won, that the U.S. won, and the U.S. won because of his initiative. So the Houthis granted Trump a major victory, a major public relations victory, a major media victory, even though if we look at the Houthi media, they've been trying to spin it as if the U.S. was the one that backed down.
Okay, now always talking about Trump's campaign against the Houthis, how it started and how it ended. Okay, now today itself in Qatar, Trump said, okay, we are dealing with the Houthis, and that was, I think, very successful. But maybe tomorrow an attack will be made in which case we go back on the offensive. Now, my question is, looking at the current state of the Houthis and Trump's unpredictability, is that a possible scenario?
It is if we look at it from the Iran-U.S. negotiations, right? Now, the one thing that we can see Trump is that he's behaving just like the Houthis. I said they were made for each other. This is a typical Houthi tactic as well, right?
Yeah.
If we don't get what we want from X actor, we will re-escalate. And so Trump is using the similar playbook as the Houthis.
Yeah.
And so what we can see is, keep in mind, the Houthis have not attacked a single civilian commercial vessel since the middle of December 2024. Okay,
yes.
That's a fact. That's a documented fact.
Yes.
They have only targeted U.S. naval ships during the Operation Rough Rider, right? They claim these attacks. And so the threat to the shipping lanes has disappeared, either because of the Houthi capabilities diminished or because it is no longer needed in order to advance their interest. We also, they also claim that if there was a ceasefire in Gaza, they would stop the attacks on the ships.
Yeah.
And so what happens now is that Trump can use this as a major negotiation tool with the Iranians.
Yeah.
We've shown Iran what we can do. We've shown Iran what can be done. And we can target the Houthis and decimate the Houthis. And this weakens Iran's capabilities in the region. This makes the Houthis are unseated from Sana'a, it weakens Iranian capabilities in the region.
Okay.
And so this forces
Yeah.
the Iranians to engage the negotiation.
Yeah, okay. Now, with this in mind, Fernando, that the number of attacks, of the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea have declined, are you suggesting that Trump's airstrikes campaign managed to degrade Houthi military capabilities, at least to some extent?
So there were no Houthi strikes from the middle of December to the middle of March, right?
Yes.
We can speculate on the reasons. The 7 weeks of U.S. airstrikes have definitely weakened Houthi capabilities because keep a list of the targets hit by the U.S. and more specifically, I mean, a top priority was definitely the ports, right? And condolences to your family once again.
Yes, thank you.
The port was a major target for the U.S. It was a major priority, not just for Israel, but for the U.S. But look at other targets. The U.S. targeted the cement factories in North Yemen. These are major targets for the U.S. because the cement quarries, the cement factories were producing material for Houthi tunnels that were being built. The Houthis have spent over 2 years with Iran's assistance building bases inside mountains and underground tunnels to hide weapons and factories and weapons factories, right? So this is a major blow to the Houthi military capability. Next, for 7 weeks, think of it as a military exercise. For 7 weeks, the U.S. military capabilities were all focused on northern Yemen. And it was an intelligence operation more than anything because the U.S. through satellites were able to follow vehicles and other equipment being moved from these tunnels and these underground bases. So I believe the U.S. has learned a lot about how the Houthi military operates and mobilizes. Okay. Third, if I may really quick, because I think this is important. Yeah. Third, by coincidence, by accident possibly, the U.S. managed to kill a lot of junior level officials, Houthi officials. This is a major blow at the local level. And this is where hopefully we can get into the missed opportunities by the political leadership council and the government of Yemen. Because the U.S. airstrikes actually managed to kill perhaps hundreds of junior level officials that affect the way that the Houthis control local populations in villages and big cities like Ib, Amran, Sada, and Hodeidah.
Okay, but do you think these things are confirmed, Fernando, because Houthis do not allow access to information, and in the same way the U.S. Central Command, did not talk much about it or did not give details about it. So within this chaotic figure, how can somebody get confirmed that some Houthi leaders were really targeted during this campaign?
Beyond the initial claim by the defense secretary regarding the missile expert being targeted, the U.S. really is very weak at the moment when it comes to confirming kills, right? But keep in mind that the U.S. targeted the office of the chief of staff in Sana'a. That is in the central security buildings. Those are major offices for the Ministry of Interior. Those were major messages to the Minister of Interior, Abdul Karim Amir al-Din al-Houthi, who is basically the head of the Houthi movement, right? So these airstrikes at the Chief of Staff office and at the Central Security office base in Sebain, those were major messages to the Houthi leadership. And so while I agree with you that the Houthis are masters of spinning propaganda, the funerals, etc., still need to be confirmed.
Yeah.
And the U.S. does indeed have its weak spot of not being able to confirm these kills or these casualties. If we look at the actual strikes, which the Houthis actually admit and they show that they did take place, we can see that the U.S. did a very good job at sending a very clear message to Beit al-Houthi itself.
Okay. Now, if we could turn to another issue, which is the anti-Houthi camp, Fernando, okay? During the U.S. campaign, okay, people were just looking for the chance that this camp will mobilize efforts to take or to make use of the U.S. strikes and then take the battle against the Houthis, and they did not. On the contrary, what we have seen is just a government reshuffling and all these things. So the question is, okay, does the anti-Houthi camp still think about the battle against the Houthis, or they are carried out with other issues?
Absolutely. Number one, this shows that the Yemeni government, the legitimate government, never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Number two, it clearly shows that the U.S. was not coordinating this campaign with the Yemeni government, with the Yemeni, troops in Tehama could not move, even if they wanted to, they have the capability, they could not move north toward Hodeidah because they were not coordinating with the U.S. and they could themselves become a target of U.S. airstrikes, right?
Yes.
So this is the weakness. And keep in mind that for over 2 months now, we've seen plenty of articles and commentary by observers claiming that there is an 80,000 troop ground operation in the works that could come next month, right? When we look at the political leadership council, when we look at the military forces in Yemen, we know how fractured they are. We know that there are 4 rival factions in the PLC, and nobody can move because they fear that the other 3 parties will move from the rear and take territory away from them, or that moving any troops toward Hodeidah, moving any troops toward Sana'a will weaken their position in their current territory, and they may lose that territory. So if we go back to 2019 to the Riyadh agreement, that was Saudi Arabia's priority. Saudi Arabia's priority in 2019 was to create a cohesive military for the Yemenis to counter the Houthis. And since November 2019, this portion of the Riyadh agreement has outright failed. We see that in Hadramaut, we see it in Shabwa, we see it in Marib, we see it in Tehama. We see it in Taiz, for example, right? There has been 0 movement in Taiz for over 4 years. So the Yemeni government is definitely against the wall because in the south of Yemen, in the liberated areas, they have popular uprisings brewing, as you mentioned, because of the economic crisis, the electricity crisis in Aden, Sayun, Mukalla, Shabwa, and the politics between political parties, rival political parties, and fighting for Hadramaut.
So when this government failed to provide the basic public services, even there in the interim capital Aden, okay, many doubt if this government or this anti-Houthi camp can take the battle against the Houthis. Okay. Now, if we would like to wrap up this conversation, Fernando, amidst all this chaos inside Yemen, end of the Houthi, the US campaign against the Houthis being degraded to some extent, okay, and the anti-Houthi camp is being busy with government positions and other priorities, okay. So what are the peace scenarios in Yemen?
Keep in mind that the Houthis were only mentioned once during the GCC meeting in Riyadh. The Houthis have only been mentioned once by Trump in Abu Dhabi, I believe, in his speech, the threats to the Houthis. So this is bad news. 3, Trump met with Jawlani, with the Syrian president in Riyadh, but there's been no meeting with the Yemeni camp in Riyadh or in Abu Dhabi.
In fact, meeting Al-Alimi was even easier because he was there.
Exactly. And this shows the failure of the Political Leadership Council to lobby the administration. Now there's a new ambassador in DC for Yemen. Hopefully he can advance, hopefully he can raise Yemen's profile at the White House and in Congress, at the State Department level. And we also had a briefing by the UN envoy yesterday at the Security Council, which again, creating expectations that completely, not real, and claiming that, number one, claiming that all parties have agreed to the roadmap. No, the Houthis have not agreed to the roadmap. The Houthis don't want UN negotiations. The Houthis need talks with Saudi Arabia. And so, there is no help. There is no financial help. This is another point that we have to bring up. It's been over a year since there's been a donors conference for Yemen. The humanitarian crisis continues to deepen. There's no money for humanitarian response, for humanitarian aid anywhere in the north or the south. This is another failure by the UN, by the international community. So there is really, we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel as of now, even though there are a lot of people who are optimistic. There are a lot of people who are actually optimistic that the Yemeni government, through Saudi Arabia, hopefully, can raise Yemen's profile in Washington and get Trump's attention. But at the moment, as long as Trump is focused on Ukraine, China, and Iran, and Israel and Gaza, I'm afraid that Yemen will continue to be at the bottom of the pile when it comes to priorities.
Okay. With this, we come to the end of this interview, Fernando. Thank you so much for your time and insight, and thank you for talking to Yemen Today TV. That's all for this time. See you next week with a new edition of The Third Dimension.